Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Old Doghouse Logistics podcast. This is episode 8. Let's go. Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Right next to you is my excellent co-host, Mr. John Brewer. How you doing?
I'm doing good for a Friday, Jeff. How about you?
I am stoked because it is Friday. I had one of those weeks. Did you have one of those weeks too?
Absolutely.
Hey, today we're talking about a subject that nobody really likes to talk about. I mean, it's
one of my favorites, Jeff.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, I believe that, John. I believe that. But man, I'll tell you, one of the biggest money pits in the logistics industry and the most stressful is claims. We've all worked with them. We all hated them. There's nothing to love about them at all. It's part of the industry. It's all about how do we mitigate them? How do we do away with them? We got a great guest that's going to be joining with us. You know who that is, right? Or no?
Yeah.
You do?
I know now.
Well, today's guest is Mr. Drew Singleton Wilder. Let's bring him in. Drew.
Good morning.
How you
Morning.
doing?
Great. How you guys doing?
We're doing well.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. We connected some time ago, and I mean, you're like a guru on the claim side. You've been involved in that. You've been in the military. You've been on the shipper side. You've been on the carrier side. You got your own business now. I don't think that John and I could have a better guest than you that is very knowledgeable in this area. So I appreciate you joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So let's get into claims. Let's first of all, Drew, tell everybody about your background who are not connected with you and about your company.
Well, like you mentioned, I started in logistics in the military. I was in the Army. Was assigned to manning an Army Medical Center logistics warehouse for 4 years. There shipping, receiving, OS&D, dealt with the civilian motor carriers. So we were creating those bill of ladings to GBLs. We were responsible for supplying all medical equipment and supplies to Fort Lewis, which is one of the largest bases in the nation, Yakima Firing Range, McCord, so forth. So I did that for 4 years. From there, I was lucky enough to get a job with Viking Freight Systems, which is now FedEx Freight. Was there for 7 years. Worked on the dock for a little bit. Did a little bit of driving. Wasn't very good at it. So winded up at OS&D in pre-claims prevention. Was there for 7 years. From there, I went to work for a freight forwarder that actually operated as a freight broker, local dredge, over the road. So had a whole lot of all the liabilities under one umbrella, right? And the fortunate thing about that is that I had the luxury of being mentored by a former ICC enforcement officer and an ICC practitioner, 2 of them. And so, I'm blessed. I was given a very good base. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that I went to a training seminar way back then. And one of the things that the trainer said that was very profound, he says, the good news is that all of you guys are here. The bad news is that only 20% of you are going to be able to take what you learned and apply it when you get back to work. If that makes sense. I was in a situation where I could actually apply it and learn and grow. So that's what really brought me to where I'm at today. When it comes to certificate of insurance compliance, working for a freight forwarder and freight broker, and again, having the proper mentorship, I understood at an early age, early in the process, the importance of that.
Mhm.
And then I also knew the lack of information out there. If you think about it, there's a lot of training on a lot of different things, but when it comes to COI compliance, there's not a lot out there. And so that kind of gravitated me toward what I do today.
That's awesome. So what got you involved into claims? I mean, was it something that you always wanted to do, or is it something that you just fell into?
I fell into it. Well, being at Viking and getting into the OS&D, we were also doing pre-claim investigations and so forth. Okay, at the terminal level, corporate handled the claims, but any claim that involved your location or generated out your location, you were assigned to do the pre-claim investigation. So that's where it started. That's where I got my foundation. And then when I went to work for the freight forwarder, I was supposed to be in operations, but they put me back in risk management. I became the claims manager, safety director, and so forth. And so it just went from there.
Gotcha. So let's kick this claim conversation off. How do we prevent claims from happening?
Well, I would say step one is having a process in place. In other words, having a standard operating procedure to prevent claims, and you need to follow it every day. And I'll give an example. Is that as claims manager, when I was with the freight forwarder, our SOP required drivers, if you're picking up freight, if it's over 50 pieces, you got to tally it. You got to have a tally sheet. We got to know you did it. Okay. We had an exception log where you picked up freight. If there was a problem with it, you called in, you reported the discrepancy. You had a discrepancy number that you put on your bill of lading or your delivery receipt, and it was cross-referenced the next day. So we went through those bill of ladings, we went through those delivery receipts at the end of the day. And if we saw that there was an exception made, but an exception number wasn't applied, we were talking to that driver. Okay. The other thing is that on the freight forwarding side, when shipments were given to motor carriers prior to that, even on the dock side, we did the same thing. Say, for instance, if you had high value equipment or something that was machinery, used machinery, not packs and so forth, we loaded those to go at all possible. But even though we added freight to it, the first thing we did was you took a picture, right? And as you went, you just took all the way down the road. High value commodities, if you unloaded it on the dock and it was going to sit there a few days, you took a picture. When it got time to load it in that consolidation load, every third of that trailer, we're taking a picture. And if it's, like I said, if it's a high value shipment as is going on, we're taking a picture. And we're taking a picture after whatever's loaded in behind it. And so those type of things help you when a claim occurs, because, and you guys know this, a lot of people will think that, okay, if I got a clear delivery bill, that means that shipment delivered, it can be a shortage. It delivered. We know it delivered. I got a clear bill. Not so fast. If there's other information to overcome that, now we have a shipment that was actually lost, and we can win that claim if you have the proper documentation.
Yeah, that's for sure. You mentioned talking about taking pictures throughout the loading process, and that's a great idea. Given my background, I probably have almost 20 years in a corporate environment, so I don't get to see the trailers get loaded. And the one thing that has always been a real big pet peeve of mine is the people on the dock taking the photos. Those photos have to tell a story, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, they do.
they're literally, it's kind of a mystery by the time it gets to me, and those photos are supposed to help me understand kind of who's at fault on this.
Right.
And for the life of me, usually the best picture I got was where they took a picture of the inside of the trailer number on the inside of the trailer, and then it just went downhill from there.
Right.
A lot of things, I would look for, was the freight shrink wrap to the pallet, yes or
Right.
no? Well, they were taking pictures mid pallet, so I couldn't tell. So,
Right.
do you have any advice for anybody out there working the docks to make them, say, a better photographer, maybe a forensic photographer? Um, any pointers that would help them out so that they can tell that story, even though whoever they're telling it to could be 1,000 miles away.
Right. Well, again, I would say, you want to pay attention to your high value, commodities, right? Electronics, things that are, machinery, things of that nature. But as far as, taking pictures, I would pretty much start where you talked about. You want to get a photo of actually the trailer that's going in, right? And then as you're taking those photos, you want to be standing further enough back. You just need to get some good angles. I just look at it like taking a picture of if you're just together and you're with your family, right? You want to get, like my wife says, you want to get a great picture that shows everything that's in that perimeter. And so that, to me, that's really the key. There's no special science to it. It's just taking good photos and having having a procedure in place that identifies when you're going to take those photos, et cetera. Like, say, for instance, get off of cargo claims for a minute. I was also safety director. And so what I would say to drivers is, in the event of a vehicle accident, they had their cameras, and we talked about how we want those pictures to be taken. In other words, you taking a picture 3 feet away from the trailer doesn't do me any good. Okay. I need to see, I need you 10 feet back, because I need to see whether there's any debris in the road, obstructions. There's a whole lot of things that I'm going to need to see. And if you're giving me a photo that's 3 feet away from the trailer, there was no point in taking it, right?
Right.
So
And
again, the same thing applies with the cargo. The same thing applies.
yeah, I can't tell you how many times I got photos and the damaged cargo was sitting on the dock.
Right.
You need to take it while it's a crime scene basically.
That,
You need to take pictures of the freight in the truck
right.
as it lays,
As it lays.
instead of bringing it out to the dock and then taking a picture, because you've just destroyed all the evidence or a large portion of it that could help you, ascertain who's at fault on this claim. So
Right.
I definitely fully understand your frustration there. So absolutely.
The other thing I would say, especially to freight forwarders, well, actually, whether it's a shipper, freight forwarder, or a freight broker, the other thing I would say is that, if at all possible, and I understand that it may not be in all cases, but the more you know about how the motor carriers that you're giving freight to operates, the better off you're going to be, right? Now, I'll give you an example. I had a claim that, this was 20 years ago, so I can talk about it now, but it was a claim that Weyerhaeuser asked me to take care for. Now, we weren't moving freight for Weyerhaeuser. We had nothing to do with it. They just asked me, because they knew who I was, they asked me would I get involved. So this shipment, it was a conveyor belt. It was like 20 feet long. It came out of their location in Huntsville, and it delivered to their location in Phoenix, Arizona. Believe it or not, on a clear bill. About a week later, Weyerhaeuser decides there's damage in the tune of $80,000. There's 2 LTL carriers involved in this move, okay? And Weyerhaeuser filed a claim, couldn't get anywhere with it. So they asked me to get involved, and I said I would, which was going to require them to fly me from Seattle down to Phoenix. Well, they wanted me to go the next day. I'm like, look, it's taken this long. There's no point in me going down there tomorrow. What I need you guys to do is, I says, the individual that you guys are going to use to repair this piece of equipment, I need them on site when I get there. Okay. So we both met there at the same time, did a thorough inspection, joint inspection. And within one phone call, I was able to get the motor carrier that declined the claim to go from $0 to $40,000, simply because I knew how they operated, right? And I tracked that shipment from origin to destination. And at the break bulk, when it switched hands, because I knew how both of those carriers operated, I knew that a picture was going to be taken. I knew how they operated, and when I asked for it, they couldn't produce it. They decided to give us $40,000.
Gotcha.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Where does a claim start? Well, I have a few things because I was on that side for 37 years. Was somebody cutting a lawn? So here's where the claim starts. It starts from the order. It starts when that customer puts in that order and the warehouseman goes to the rack to pick that order. And here's a couple problems that happen with that. Okay. Number one, sometimes the units, the SKU units that are being stocked there can be picked in full quantity or partial. And sometimes warehouse workers, being warehouse workers, they take pieces out of the box and they seal them up, but they don't write partial on the outside of the box. So you have a shortage automatically there. Another thing that happens with it, I could go into great detail and talk hours on this, but I'm going to simplify this. A lot of times, I don't know if you guys heard of the pyramid stack. And what I mean by the pyramid stack is that they put light packages on the bottom of the skid and put heavy packages on top, crushing them because of the weight, because every single shipment out there will move. Nothing is stable. They'll sway left to right. They'll go up and down because of the roads and all of this. And that sway and that movement creates inertia for impact on those boxes. Secondly, there's a reason why they call skids 40 by 48, 48 by 48, because you want to keep that merchandise in the confines of that 48 by 48 with no overhang. Because what happens with the overhang is when the forklift drivers pick that up and they tilt the forks forward, they hit the next box and all of this. Or at a cross stock, you've got moving forklifts back and forth and things are going to happen. I did inspections, surprise inspections on major LTL carriers. One of them was the number one LTL carrier out there. We all know who that is right now with the lowest OR. I actually wrote work instructions for them because I identified issues within their operations going down to a terminal, a specific terminal that was causing problems. The other thing is it's the driver responsibility. If you've got high value cargo, Drew mentioned electronics, you don't wrap the pallet in the staging area. A lot of them have chimney blocks. Depending upon the size of the material, you might have a 7 and 8, a 4 configuration, and then you invert it to lock in the shipments and all of that. Don't wrap it until the driver can inspect the shipment, be on the dock, look at the boxes, look at the configuration, and we had a skid count, quality count, and I wouldn't let anything go off the dock. And I trained all my supervisors and dock personnel this as well, that the driver had the opportunity, if he didn't like the way that a box looked, he can have that replaced. He can talk to the supervisor and have that box replaced and a new one put in there. That's preventative measures that can be looked into. It's all about mitigating cost, minimizing or eliminating claims. It all starts on that dock. The other thing too, depending upon the shipment, you can get corner guards. They're really thick, corrugated, very thick, that you can put on the edges when you wrap your pallets. This prevents sway, number one, because it makes the pallet more rigid. You take the shrink wrap, you twist it halfway around the pallet so that it locks like this on it. It keeps everything nice and rigid. And John was talking about wrapping it to the pallet and making sure that there's no overhang on that, because you want that pallet as rigid as possible. And a lot of things that happen also outside the dock is at the cross docks. And, you know, a lot of LTL carriers out there don't like surprise visits, you know, because they do things differently when their customers aren't there. And I proved it over and over again. A lot of the cross dock have cut times, and those cut times are specific, and they have to get that material from one truck cross dock into another line haul that's going to another terminal somewhere in the country. A lot of times what happens is those pallets are like this, okay? A forklift driver will pick up this first pallet, they'll tilt it like this and run 2 pallets into over the load leveler into the truck to do 2 for 1. What happens is that truck and that load level, it goes up and down. It goes up and down because of the weight transfer. And what happens is that first pallet that's being pushed by the back pallet, that first pallet drops. The second pallet goes above the pallet and hits the packages, and boom, you got holes in there. You've got all this different kinds of stuff. These are the kind of things that when I say I look for hidden bank opportunities, I know how it operates. I investigate. I go because I know the strong possibilities of what's going to happen prior to the shipment being picked, when it's picked, when it's staged, when it's loaded, when it's cross-docked, all the way through the whole thing. I can identify that and say that wholeheartedly, 100%. There are things that a lot of companies out there do because of speed. They need to get it done. They got the C-level people, they got the traffic manager, logistics manager, supply chain manager, putting a lot of pressure on them. But the biggest thing is that those 3 entities in management should be on the dock, in the trenches, and looking what's being done and writing work instructions to prevent these type of things from happening.
Yeah, completely agree there, Jeff. Having that knowledge and knowing where, you know, how that freight moves through the system is important. One thing, Drew, I get asked a lot about is, especially, like I said, being in a corporate environment, is, you know, concealed damage.
Right.
How can a shipper protect themselves, or even a receiver, if somebody's buying something, how can they protect themselves from concealed damage?
I would say it's not always feasible, but as Jeff mentioned, when you're receiving that cargo, if you see that, you know, obviously if you see damage, you're gonna inspect it and look in. But if you see boxes that have creases in them, things of that nature, that's gonna prompt me to open that box and do a good inspection right on site. The sooner you know, the better off you're going to be with the concealed damage claim. That's the best way I can explain it. What would you say, Jeff?
Yeah, there's 2 things that come to mind on that. First and foremost is that concealed means you can't see it, right? There's no visible damage present where you can immediately say change, you know,
Right.
get that, get a replacement. What I did was I mitigated. I did some concession negotiation.
Right.
And what that means is that, look, let's face it, to when you file a claim, it takes between 30 and 90 days
Right.
to file that.
Right.
Concealed damage, you have up to 9 months to put in a claim for something that was actually inventoried, pardon me, 9 months ago that you didn't know it until it was picked.
Right.
And all of a sudden you found out, hey, I got a damaged piece. So there's a lot of investigation goes, right? You got SKUs that were received in at the warehouse 9 months ago. You've got serial numbers. Hopefully, you know, on your WMS and you're scanning an RF and everything, you've scanned all that stuff. Now you got to backtrace, right?
Right.
Because now you need the original documents. You need all this, who was the carrier that delivered it, all this other kind of stuff. And there's a lot of SG&A costs that's associated with that. So when I say concession negotiations, that means that if a the value of a specific item that's concealed is up to X, that's
Right.
automatically paid
Right.
because it's going to save you more money in the back room than it would if you went through the whole process,
Right.
sending in all those documents and doing all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it costs a lot of money, right, per individual to mitigate and process the claim from the start to the end.
Right.
That could add up to several $100s on
Right.
each claim. So you figure if you've got something that's $150, $200 worth of damage, pay it automatically. Boom, get it off there, because you're going to spend a hell of a lot more money than that. But that has to be identified in the contract, the transportation contract, indemnification, per occurrence, all this other kind of stuff that's hidden, in the small writing of a contract. You have to identify that and then start negotiating from that so that it's clear. And the other thing too is that what are the 4 different types of claims that you can claim for?
Well, well, of course, shortages. You can damages. Some people think that you can claim for late deliveries, but that's specially consequential damages. So that's a different conversation altogether. That has to be something that's, as you mentioned, negotiated up front. But I would say that the biggest would be whether it's over, short, or damage would be my 2 things, my 3 things.
Yeah. So typically there's the 4. There's the OS&D, visual, and conceal. There's another big thing that a lot of brokers don't even know out there, shippers as well. That's critical, and it's cost effective, and it's what I call hidden bank opportunities of finding real dollars to bring back to not just my operation as a service provider, but also the shippers. And that is transportation costs. And let me explain on that just a little bit. So if you've got a large LTL shipment, let's just say FAK 85, it weighs 500 pounds, right? Something goes wrong with that specific shipment and you're claiming, well, say there's 75 pounds worth of claim damage on that. Well, guess what, guys? You've already paid for $500 shipment. That's a class 85. That's no longer 500 pounds, no longer class 85, because that claim piece has now been pulled away from that shipment. It's no longer part of that. And so that could change the whole configuration. One, it's not a 500-pound shipment anymore. You call it a 400-pound, may not be an FAK 85. It might be a 100, a 125, which is going to change the whole cost of that shipment based on density alone. So you want to claim for transportation cost on that as well. And a lot of people out there don't do it, and they should, because that's part of it. They say, oh, well, you know what? You got to pay for the price of freight before the claim is processed, right? You can't hold, you can't stop payment, all of this kind of stuff, because you got to go through the process. But it's what happens after the process and the type of refund that you get. And the other thing too is the average cost per claim value pound that you have to identify and negotiate up front, because you could have a single product on a freight shipment, or you could have multiple products, different SKUs on that, which will create different values. And the way that you can identify that is not just by the invoice that you put, packing slip or whatever, on a specific package, but it's also line item detail on the bill of lading that you're creating. So you should, to be able to identify that you have X amount of packages for this specific SKU, and here's your class, and here's your poundage, all the way down on the bill of lading. So this way it's identified straight up that Well, you know what? When you write that shortage and stuff like that, obviously, the driver's not going to know. The shipper will find out after they break the shrink wrap and open it up, and they're like, "Oh, we didn't get this done." Now that's where the deduction happens on that LTL shipment, where you're going to eliminate that class, that pound, that SKU, and then start from scratch to see what that delta is. That should also be part of not the, there's a difference between retail and wholesale, right?
Right.
No, you're not going to get paid for what you think the consumer's going to pay for it. It's what you bought it for.
Exactly.
It's your cost.
Yep.
Not what it could have been,
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and you have to prove that too. That's why you have to, when you submit for claims, you talked about photos, you have to have all the documents, the DER, the bill of lading, you name it, etc. It has to be all part of that. And that's how you reduce your cost on that side as well. And one thing that I forgot, I'm going to go back just to about the dock operations and the configurations of pallet. One of the biggest things that a shipper should do to save a possible claim is on a piece of paper like this, right? Do not break shrink wrap.
Yeah.
Right? Do not put it on just one side, 4 sides, all the way around it. The other thing too, that I definitely want to cover real quick, Drew, you mentioned about freight forwarders, air shipments, and all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I had a big problem many, many years ago because when you ship when you give it to a freight forwarder, they give it to airlines and stuff like that, everything is palletized. When they put it into the belly of the plane, right? You're paying the skid. You got about maybe 6 inches of skid, 48 by 48. Then you have the product level. Well, guess what they do? When they go and load that plane, they dismantle that pallet.
They do.
They put the pallet in there. They're going to break it down by piece because they want to fulfill, unless it's in an LD3, one of those cargo hold containers that they go in and roll it in, stuff like that. But a lot of the small planes, passenger, whatever cargo, they're going to break them down because they want to maximize that. There's a guy in there, dude, with a little conveyor thing, and they're just packing those things in there. So why are you paying for the cost of the pallet in those dimensions when they're breaking it down? It's a convenience. The way that I negotiate it, I said, I'm doing it. I could give it to you like a parcel carrier, like a UPS, and take it and give you a master pull list, and then you sign off for the number of pallet. But what I did was I gave you a pallet. I don't get paid for that pallet. But now you're increasing the chances of me getting claims too, because that left my facility and that was in good shape and you signed for it. Now you're breaking it down and throwing it and mingling it with other things. So there's a lot of things you have to think about, from an operational point of view, and where to look and how to eliminate a lot of problems.
Yeah. And let me jump in here, Jeff, because you hit on a point that I've had to deal with fairly recently. We, especially with our shipments that go to Alaska and Mexico, so they obviously are going to go through to a forwarder, and by the time they get to the delivery place, some cases are damaged or they're missing and what have you. And one of the things, I guess being from Mississippi, I have to have some ingenuity. So we couldn't figure out what was happening because we knew, we were taking pictures of it when it shipped out. And by the time it got to, like I said, the consignee, it was missing shortages or damages. Yep. So the one thing we did to kind of figure it out is I had the distributor use colored shrink wrap, like blue shrink wrap or green shrink wrap. So we wrapped the skid in green or blue, and then we had the consignee take a picture of it when it arrived, and 9 times out of 10, it was wrapped in clear.
Yeah.
So that's how we figured out where the cases were getting damaged and shorted was at their own forwarder, and they were doing the exact same thing that you just mentioned. So yeah, you have to kind of think like a criminal sometimes.
You got to outthink the thinkers. And to your point too, John, is that when I was shipping high high value electronics, not one pallet left without me putting wrapping each pallet in 4 mil black wrap. Nobody knew what was in there, especially because there's a lot of inside jobs and stuff like that. They may not know where it came from when it goes to a cross stock or whatever, right? They don't know what's in there or where it is. So it's going to kind of be like, should I rip this thing out and should I go into it or what? With a clear plastic, everybody has that. Not going around the freaking pallet, to your point. But there's so many different ways and steps that you can take to kind of minimize it. Will it happen? Yeah, it might happen, but you're going to minimize that problem and make the criminals think, man, if I do this, they're going to know. You know what I mean? I mean, because you can identify it, especially with a lost shipment as well. To your point, John, if you have a specific color nobody else has, and then you have a shortage someplace and it's a pallet, everything is clear. Oh, there's a yellow one. That's got to be John's. You know what I mean?
Right,
so there's certain things that you can do to prevent, loss to being found.
That's true. But another thing I would say is that especially when it comes to shortages and high value things, back in the day, I know you guys remember when there was Radio Shacks, right? And video content. Well, when I was with Viking, we were picking up loads out of Northern California, and there would be LTLs, but they'd be loaded to go. So in other words, we would say first stop would be, say, in Olympia, Washington, to a Video Concepts, and it just went on up the line to like Bellingham. But some of those shipments winded up coming to the Seattle dock and being cross docked. Okay, now after it had been going on a while, what I started noticing was, and this was back when VCRs were $700, right? Mm-hmm. What I noticed is that every other week there would be a video or two, VCR 2. One would be short on the order to Linwood. One would be short on the order to Olympia. And then they kind of graduated up to the widescreen floor model TVs. So these were thousands and thousands of dollars. And so, we did everything we could to figure out where where we were going wrong. We even had someone tell the line drivers. I'm talking about from pickup all the way up the line. And one of the things that after we went through that process and we were getting ready to do that, I told the investigator out of the corporate office, I says, I really don't think that we're going to gain anything from following the line driver. I says, I don't believe any of them are doing it. I said, it's happening right here at the Seattle office. And eventually we found out, but it was in front of us the whole time. This is how it played out. One of the, when you say inside job, one of the assistant dock supervisors, him and his wife were going through a divorce. They had 3 kids. And every day she would tell us, he's got to pay more. She's telling us, she's draining the man dry. She's demanding all this money, and the freight's walking out the door. It was right in front of us. And how we eventually got to the bottom of it is that one of the guys that was involved pissed his girlfriend off, and guess what she did? She called and spilled all the beans. But again, it was right in front of us the whole time.
But desperate people do desperate things in desperate times.
But all I'm saying is that if I would have had an opportunity to do it my way, the first thing I would have done was taken him off of it, right? And the guys that he was involved in. That would have been the first thing I would have done. Because she was clearly saying, and think about it, right? She was draining the guy dry. You could see it, right? So why not look there first? Because when you think about it, when you say inside jobs with motor carriers, it's typically middle to upper management or the dispatcher that's doing it, or somebody that's in control. Right. Because see, they were able to take those. What they were doing is that doing the breaks, like at 3 o'clock in the morning, when everybody's upstairs on break, they're downstairs taking what they wanted.
Yeah, and the other thing too, if you're a leader, and you
Right.
can't lead by sitting in an office. Number one, you have to be in the trenches with your people.
Right.
And one of the biggest things that people fail to do, or leaders fail to do, is listen with intent. That's
Right.
a big word, intent.
Yes.
And if you just go out there to listen, that's one thing. But if you listen with intent, you're going to hear things that a lot of other people aren't going to hear that would probably drive suspicion. It
Right.
could be an act, it could be a physical thing that when they're talking to somebody, they're squirmish or they're doing something that's not normal.
Not
Or you
normal.
hear them saying something and you're like, man, something doesn't seem right here, then you start digging in, and
Right.
that suspicion leads you to go almost like on maneuvers and
Right.
go into a place that if you were a criminal, and you talked about, John, thinking like a criminal, go into a non-suspicious kind of place where it's black or dark or something, and you just watch what's going on. And
Right.
then lo and behold, boom. And it's funny that we're talking about that, but I had an inside job when I was working for Onkyo Electronics back in the 80s, where I hired a one-armed guy
Mhm.
to load. He was a good warehouse worker and everything, but he also was the one-armed bandit. I mean, and it's funny, but it's sad. But this guy was taking high-end receivers,
Right.
breaking them down at night, going into the bathroom, pushing up the ceiling tile and putting them up there,
Right.
and then building them back when he got to the house, because he was taking bits and pieces out. And then I just got suspicious, and I had that feeling, that gut feeling that John and I talk all about.
Yeah.
And I stopped him, and lo and behold, I found a circuit board on him.
Mhm.
And then called the police, and the police went and investigated, and they found many pieces at his home.
Right.
These are the kind of things, that intuitive nature, that gut feeling that if you listen with intent, you're going to find out many different things.
You will. Can I just go back to one thing real quick, Jeff?
Sure.
When you were talking about, proper measure of loss, right? And in that claims process, uh, one of the things that I would mention is that during that time I was working for the freight forwarder. We had an over the road operation as well, and so we were giving a shipment full load by a freight broker. Actually, no, I think it was a freight forwarder for our over the road division to deliver. And what happened is that this was over the holidays. It was leading up to Black Friday, Thanksgiving, the best, the largest, biggest shopping day of the year, right?
Mhm.
And so this full load was going to be delivered to the Target distribution center, I believe back then, memory serves me correct, to Fontana, California. Well, for whatever reason, dispatch in our drop yard in California, they forgot it. And it sit there for like 3 or 4 days. They realized it was there. They made an appointment to deliver it, and then they forgot, they left it again. So it was only the third time that they remembered to get it delivered. So when the driver gets to Target in Fontana, they decide they don't want the shipment. They say that the shipment needed to be there, 4 days before, because they needed to get it processed and out to the stores because they needed it on the shelves. That the day after Thanksgiving, right? And so they said that because that couldn't happen, the shipment had no value. They refused it, right? So now we have it back. How it ended was, and it kept going until the freight forwarder seeked the advice of an attorney. And when they did, the attorney told them the same thing I did. In order for you to prove your proper measure of loss, you would have to have sold the product, right? You didn't, right? You didn't put it on the shelves. When you refused it, there were 23 days left till Christmas. You said these were items for Christmas. So by the fact that you did not accept the load, put it on the shelves and attempt to sell it, you can't really say what the loss would have been.
Right.
The other
I mean,
element to it is that they stated that these were items that were wrapped in like a Christmas type package, right? What I did was is I had a driver go over to our drop yard, take one of the boxes, and ship it up to me overnight. And when I opened it up, there was no Christmas wrap. What it was is that these are regular travel bags, right? That plastic, and you have the brush, the comb, that type. Yeah, that's what it was. And they sold them at Kmart year round. Claim went away. So what I said to the freight forwarding shipper, I says, okay, this is what we'll do. We'll bring the load back to our yard. We'll put it in our warehouse. You find people, you sell it, and as you sell it, we'll deliver it. But we're not going to give you $100,000.
there you go.
Yeah.
We're sitting here talking about theft, and when I worked in Memphis, we partnered with the FBI Cargo Security Task Force, and a lot of shippers got into that, and they worked with the FBI on inside jobs and stuff. And we were attending a luncheon one day, and the speaker started talking about thieves stealing empty trailers. And I'm like, why in the world would anybody want to steal an empty trailer?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, what they do is they steal the empty trailer, they fill it up with hazardous materials or hazardous waste, park it on the side of the road. The DOT or the EPA comes by, finds out who owns the trailer,
Right.
and they're the ones who are tasked with the exorbitant cost of cleaning it up.
Right.
And I was like, man, that is just diabolical.
Yeah.
And and I would think, just logically speaking here, depending upon the size of the fleet, and if they went into a yard and just happened to have a power unit clip into one and leave, sometimes these guys don't even know that their trailer was taken if they don't have cameras and stuff like this, until your point, John, where, hey, we've got a trailer full of 6.1 hazardous sitting on Route 80 out here in whatever.
Right.
Come get your stuff. What happened? Did you break down? What do you mean? Well, here's the trailer number.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's in our yard. No, it's not.
No, it's
it's
not.
not.
It's not there anymore.
Driver, did your driver power unit break down? I mean, you can just see this unfolding, to your point. And it's I mean, what do you do with that?
I mean, you just gotta pay to have it cleaned up. I mean, there's it's and
A lot of money.
Preferably start installing some cameras, because I guarantee you they cameras are cheaper than the cleanup was.
Yep. I would agree with that.
Oh yeah.
I would definitely agree with that.
So it was another instance I had. It was this one's kind of funny. So I worked for a large printer, and they did periodicals, magazines, a lot of postal freight, and we had one of our loads got stolen off a truck stop lot in Dallas, and so they found it a few days later. It was the back end was opened, and it was nothing but mail. Nothing of any value. It was a bunch of magazines. So I sit here and I told the people, I said, man, can you imagine their faces when they opened up those doors and there was nothing in there but junk mail?
Yeah. They were like, shit. Yep. I mean, the inside jobs with the dispatcher, it's like, hey, best time to come about 2:30 a.m. That's when the guys take the break, go and hit trailer T15967. It's going to be parked in the northwest corner. Don't worry about the guard usually comes in, gets coffee at that time. Gates will be open. Just come in, hook, and go. Boom. That's how it goes.
Yep. That's how it goes.
And if you got a security camera, I mean, that happened a long time ago when I was at Ford, and we had an inside job where somebody stole a whole load of engines. I mean, engines, they put the keys, one of the guys that will work there, disgruntled, put the keys on the front tire, behind the front tire, on the A-frame or something, and told them where it was. And boom, who went, because everybody thought that it was part of the fleet dispatch, daily dispatch, at one of 48 that I ran every single day. And they thought that it just went out, so nobody was doing that. And then all of a sudden, they're like, "Hey, that trailer, whatever, that was an inbound shipment that we received out from Michigan, and it's now gone." So literally, what I did was I actually stayed in my office and did the loop on the security thing and kept on watching and watching and watching. I said, "I'm going to catch this son of a bitch, man. I'm telling you right now." And sure enough, after hours, several hours sitting there was this image of a power unit. I got the number and everything, but it was like this fast. And I had to slow it down and then back up. But I'm talking like 17 hours into this, because nobody was picking it up, even the cops, whatever. And I was like, I'm telling you, it's got to be on here. And sure enough, boom, I found it. And then they did because they had the tracking on that shipment on the power unit too. And sure enough, they found it in Patterson, New Jersey, which is well known for theft all over that area. But we found it, and the problem is that they didn't have the proper equipment to offload those things. Those things are heavy, and we were able to do it in a very short period of time, and found it down an alley someplace in Patterson, but we got the contents back. But and then also the power unit was found miles and miles away, and then we were like, what happened? And finally, one of the drivers didn't show up for weeks, and we knew exactly who it was. And to your point, a disgruntled, pissed off employee just thought that he could go away and do something and get paid for it, and it didn't happen that way.
Yeah. And the last 17 years I've been shipping shipping food products, both commercially and food service. So when you get a theft in there, like if somebody comes into your yard and jacks the door open and takes a couple cases of whatever's in there, it opens up a whole new thing, because the food security piece of this is out the window. I mean, you don't know if they've tampered with the product. You don't know,
right.
Did they stick a syringe through the packing tape and inject something in there that's going to get somebody sick? So that whole food security thing it just compounds every bit of it, and it is just a mess. So, and especially if you're shipping for specific brands. My last job, we did Mazola, and we did Argo cornstarch and Karo syrup. Basically edible oils and spices.
Yep.
And anytime we had that happen, I mean, we had to get QA in there and do a full bore inspection, pull everything out, go through every case just to make sure, because I mean, our brands are riding on that. And if you remember, the situation with Tylenol several years ago, when their stuff got impacted, it can kill a brand, and it can kill a brand in a heartbeat. And you don't want that. You don't want people getting sick, period. But you definitely don't want to kill the brand either. So you have to you have to be pretty extensive on that. And I mean, we've actually refused loads where the seal was missing, because we don't know if that had been tampered with en route.
Right.
Well, you would have to anyway, because of the strict guidelines.
Yes.
To your point, you don't know whether it's been compromised.
Right.
And I would have to agree with you. How do you really, especially when it comes to the brand, how do you really protect the brand and also follow those guidelines without doing that full bore inspection?
Exactly.
Make sure that because you don't know, someone could have taken a box, depending on how the load's configured, but they could have tampered with the box visibly at one part of the trailer, but went further up in the trailer and did something else. You just don't know.
You don't know. And you can't take that risk. I mean, it's just you don't want anybody getting sick. You sure don't want anybody dying.
No.
It's food safety and food security is just extreme.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's you gotta. I mean, you can't do stuff like if you were just shipping bricks or something. So it just adds a whole new level of complexity to your situation.
It does.
And that's why, as a broker or carrier, you need to get food certified, food transportation. I'm foods certified for transportation. Got my certificate behind here if you want to see it. But yes, you need to go through that because it's so important to your point, John. And another thing too, we're talking about claims, but one of the biggest things is transfer of ownership. And let me explain transfer of ownership. When a trailer is parked to your door at your facility and it's sealed, basically, if you have a door seal or whatever, and it's there, as that trailer is parked, it's part of your warehouse. Okay, it's part of your warehouse. When you're loading that material into that trailer, and hopefully you did an inspection on that trailer before it's loaded, because that's part of claims as well. That's a subject of a different time. But once that, there's two things that happen on that. One, once there's a shipper load and count and seal. Don't let anybody fool you, but people say that once you have a bill of lading that says SLC on it, that the driver can't break that seal. Bullshit. They can.
Yes,
it's the responsibility of the driver. If he sees his trailer tilting or something just doesn't look right, you can seek the dock supervisor. You can have the dock supervisor come out, or even the traffic manager, logistics manager, put in your concerns. They have to be there visibly to show when you snap that seal, or inspect it, backs up and have to be switched or whatever. So if the bill of lading has seal number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right, that's on it, you need to cross it out, note it, put the new seal on it, identify that number, right, and then initial it, and then write on it, seal intact. Very important. Very, very important. A crucial element to putting in claims. It must be that way, because if you don't note that new seal and it comes in with a different seal, that whole load's going to be gone. I'm going to say, especially on food, especially on food, right?
That also happens in your DOT inspections and your border inspections.
That's true.
They'll break that seal.
Absolutely. So here's the thing on the claim side. All right, when that trailer again is tight against your door, the ownership of the material is yours as you're loading it. Once that trailer breaks the seal, the transfer of ownership goes from the shipper to the consignee, right? So it depends on who procured the carrier. If the carrier procured by the consignee puts in the claim for the goods, not the shipper. If it's the shipper who procured the carrier and the carrier did that, the shipper does that. Unless there's some type of agreement that's made by shipper routed, consignee routed, or whatever, you have to determine that up front, because that's part of cost of goods sold as well. Because if you're going to be selling it, you're procuring the shipment. That's why they need to do budgets and forecasts, because that cost of transportation is now part of the cost of goods sold. And they identify it, how much that's going to cost per unit, how many units are on there, where it's going, etc. They up that to take care of that, because they need to make the profits and have the consumer pay for that transportation, because they're not paying for it. Somebody's paying for it. So that's all crucial stuff that you have to understand that whole thing and ask questions and stuff, because you may not necessarily procured that, routed the carrier, but that's your shipper, because you do shipper, and all of a sudden the shipper sends it to you as a broker and says, "Need your file claim." No.
Well, Jeff, it looks like we're at the top of the hour. Drew, do you have any parting words for our audience?
Well, yeah, I would like to say this to freight brokers out there. Over the last 6 months or so, I've had several reach out to me saying a cargo claim was being denied, and these were, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 claims. The reason that the cargo claims were denied is that the cargo, and these were stolen shipments. Some were damaged, but the reason that the claims were denied is that the trailer wasn't listed on the policy. It was a scheduled policy. The only way to get around that is to make sure that the motor carriers you hire have hired autos. If they don't, it's over. Because if the trailer isn't listed on the policy, the cargo coverage, it's clear. Claim's not going to be paid. There's nothing you can do about it. And there's one option. Have your carriers, motor carriers, have that coverage. Insurance agents and brokers sell it. It's not that expensive. Do it. Because if you don't, you have nothing.
Good point. Good
Drew,
point.
Drew, we appreciate you being on the show, and definitely a lot of good information today. So hopefully our audience took some notes and had a few laughs and actually learned something. I know I did, for sure.
Oh, I definitely had a couple laughs, and I love this subject of claims. I really do. I mean, because it's such a big part of the logistics industry, and it happens every single day, and it's how you approach it and what you do within that process that's either going to make you look good or make you look really, really bad. So, you know, I hope that we shared enough information, but we're always available, John, myself, and Drew. You have any questions, you can look us up on LinkedIn. Send us a DM. We'll be more than happy to answer your questions, because we want to make sure that you're doing the right things for the right reasons. And that's why we do these shows. So I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a great weekend.
Yes, you as well. Thanks. Until next time, follow, share, subscribe to the Old Dog Logistics Podcast. We'll be back next week at 11 a.m. for episode 9. Who knows what we'll be talking about? Otherwise, have a great